Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Larry Scarpa, and Jeff Huber is with us. Jeff runs our Florida office, which we opened about 5 years ago. And so we're going to kind of show you a very limited uh, spectrum of our work that deals with some cultural spaces and places. And they will seem to be mostly centered around kind of museum type projects. This is not by any stretch all inclusive, but we focused it to 5 what we think interrelated and interesting projects. So I'm going to start with a project in Los Angeles. This is called the American Tropical Interpretive Center. People call it the Sakeros Museum. It's downtown on Olvera Street. This project lasted for 12 years and 3 mayors. So it was not a huge project, but a kind of difficult one, I think largely because of the historic fabric. So you can see in the aerial view, it's the restoration and rehabilitation of 5 historic buildings between Olvera Street and Main Street. For those of you who don't know, this is considered the birthplace of Los Angeles, commonly known as El Pueblo. And these were really the first settlements in Los Angeles. The arrows you see, what we're primarily going to talk about is a mural that was painted on the side of the building on the 2nd floor of Italian Hall, which was this mural. And it was done in 1932 by David Alfaro Sakeros. And he was essentially commissioned by the Los Angeles business owners. They were known as the Plaza Art Center at that time, and they commissioned him to create a mural that was supposed to be about happy men and parrots and palm trees with fruit falling into the mouths of people, a very happy kind of mural. But Sakeros completely disobeyed and ignored them. And he painted something that was much more glim that he named American Tropical. If you translate the Spanish meaning, it translates into oppressed and destroyed by imperialism. So you can kind of see in this, the mural, there's on the crucifix as a Native American, and you could see the really twisted and warped trees, and there's an eagle on top of the crucifix there. And up in the right-hand corner, you have some native Mexicans, ready to fire guns at people. So, when he was finished, basically, immediately it was whitewashed over. So it was never really seen. But this is what it would have looked like at the time that it was painted. It's 85 feet long. It takes up the entire roof facade. It's 18 feet tall. And up until 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they started talking about restoring this. So it sat like this for more than 50 years, completely covered up. And then the Getty Conservation Institute with the city of LA and the Bureau of Engineering, made a real push to bring this back to life as part of the city's past. And so our task really, our largest task was basically to make the mural viewable and to, at the same time, protect it. So it was very difficult because you got a lot of historic fabric that wants to crumble. There were tenants in place. And so we had to design a structure that where you could see it. So this is just one page of thousands of shade and shadow studies we did. So the whole idea was to protect it. And for those in the know, it's impossible to keep 100% of the light off, but for the most parts of the day and most parts of the year, it's completely open, and it does have an automatic blind late in the afternoon on primarily in the winter times. This is a basic section through it, and you can see the museum is actually 4 buildings away from the mural and some of our studies. So you're viewing across 3 buildings and you go up on the roof to view it. So the whole construction happened outside of the buildings. And we kind of just, if you think about like dropping columns through the existing buildings. And because, you know, you don't want columns in front of the mural, it's a almost 100-foot clear span, and the structure has 2 columns. So we knew that when we started this, that the original water supply line was under this area somewhere, but we didn't know exactly where. Well, we quickly found it. It's known, they call the Zanja Madre, is that right, Janet? The mother pipe?
Zanja Madre.
Okay. And it happened to be directly under one of our columns. So we, in the middle of construction, we kind of had to redesign the foundations to support the structure. And that's what the foundation looked like. It's basically a transfer beam. And we took out, you know, one of the facades of the historic building, and you could see it's like the entire width of the building, and we pushed it in with a hydraulic crane into the basement, and then we rebuilt the building around it. The other component was the canopy to protect the mural, and that was prefabricated in pieces off-site and shipped to the site, and we used the empty parking lot across the street on Main Street to assemble the entire canopy. And then in one morning, the entire thing was put in place. So you can see here, we just closed a section of the street and it was lifted into place. The bar you see on the right is the housing for the permanent protection of the mural. And here you can see the workers putting that in place. You notice too, the mural is still covered, completely covered. And it wasn't until the canopy was up that we uncovered the mural, and the Getty folks went to work. And they worked on this continuously for over a year, meticulously, you know, bringing it back. So what you're gonna see here is not a restored mural. It's what the Getty describes as conserved, because they did not have enough information on the colors. So rather than moving forward, they just collected all the samples and they've conserved the mural. So this is about what it looks like now, you know, in the daytime, and then with some lighting on that. And here it is in the context. So you can see it sort of fits pretty seamlessly into the fabric of the streetscape. But on the bottom image, you can see the viewing platform. That's a perforated copper, and that's where you actually come up to the roof and you can look across and see the mural. And below, it's to the extreme right, right below the viewing canopy, is the Interpretive Center. And the balance of those buildings are really vibrant retail and restaurants on there. And so here you can kind of see a before and after. The canopy allows some light to transmit through it. About 15% of the light comes through. And then on the sides, these are perforated copper screens that again filter the light so that you get light through them, but it's reflected light, and you're able to actually get light on the mural so that you can see it. And, you know, we use this as a way to kind of articulate the structure and not really feel like a wall, but a little bit more fine grained like the buildings that exist. And that's what you would see from, that's what you do see today from the Olvera Street side. And this is the actual entry to it. So up above where you see, that's the viewing platform directly over the entry in perforated copper. This very, very complicated. That is a fire exit for Olvera Street, as well as the entry to the museum itself. We clad it all in Alaskan yellow cedar, the frames, and you'll see some of the details here where we restored parts of the building and also have these more contemporary interventions. And then the inside was done by IQ Magic and Tom Hartman. And we kind of kept, a lot of it was not in great condition. We kept the roof and the base and restored some of the floors, but where we could preserve the existing building, we did. The next project is a museum in Cedar City, Utah. If you have never been to Cedar City, it's in southern Utah, so it's about a 2-hour drive from Las Vegas and basically in the middle of Zion National Park. So you get these beautiful red mountains, and it's on the campus of Southern Utah University. So we did this building along with the Shakespeare Festival. It's a $40 million arts complex, and it's in the city, but also on the campus. So they have about 1 million people a year that come to Cedar City for the Shakespeare Festival. The museum was largely born out of this guy, Jim Jones. Not a great name, but Jim Jones is a native of Cedar City, and he is a very well-known artist for painting landscapes in the West. This is one of his paintings, and he did in his life over 400 paintings of Zion, over 100 paintings of Grand Canyon, and he left the final body of his work, which was about 20 paintings, very, very large paintings, to Southern Utah University. And they had a small gallery on campus, but this was the impetus for building the building that we built to house his paintings. We were obviously inspired by a lot of these canyons, so we kind of looked at that as ideas, how you could generate kind of building form, something that flowed, and, looked at a way to kind of develop a language that felt a lot more like the slot canyons of the area. So that manifested itself in a building that started to look something like this. It's a 4-sided facade. So there's, most buildings like this have a service alley, a service area. We have none of that. It's like the centerpiece of the campus. So within everything, we had to take all of the mechanical, all of the systems, which, really are ugly, and we had to put them somewhere on the building. And I'll show you that in a little bit. But this is a view that's looking west, and that's the sculpture garden, which is, I'm not sure whether to call it the front or the back. It's not the entry side, but it is another sort of front door. And so what we wanted to do was, the school wanted the building facing the university, which was to the west, and the whole art center was to the east. So, it's like, how do you do both? So we put the front door to the west, which isn't a great orientation for galleries, if you're going to display paintings. and we wanted the building to be really open. So the idea we came up with was this kind of free-form roof, but also a, a massive porch on the west, so that we can have an entire glazed facade on the west. So when you drive by this museum, you can look directly into the gallery and see the artwork, and never need curtains to shade it from the sun. The other thing here is you'll see as I move forward, the roof form, there are zero roof drains, zero penetrations in the roof. So it just naturally flows like in the canyons, and the two ends actually are kind of big holes in the facade, and we collect all of the storm water underground, and that's kind of used for landscape and so forth. So it really flows a lot like the canyons. So here you can kind of see the building form. This is looking at the, seeing the west side, looking to the east at the arts complex, and you can kind of see the porch there at the entry. Another thing, this is the opposite side of the sculpture garden, and those are two major sycamore trees. In our design, there were about 14 beautiful mature trees that we kept all of them within the project. So you can see them kind of sprinkled around there. That's the sculpture garden. To the north is the main street that you'll see. Thank you. And here's a view of the sculpture court side before our trees got really too big. But this is, you know, what it looks like most of the time now in the winter and the summer. And here's the kind of entry porch, and you can see the glass that's kind of deep behind to the north edge, and you know, not great pictures, but you are able to see directly into the museum. And there's the slot, and I looked for some photos. I couldn't actually find them. I thought I had them, but the snow, when it snows, it collects there, and a lot of the students come out. It's like become a photographic moment with the snow wedged in the slot, and then it just melts and goes down into the reservoir. Here's the detail of that. These are concrete, thin concrete panels that have a texture on them. The thing about the building is, you know, it's always challenging when you have double curvature in forms, and so we have become adept at rationalizing all this geometry so that it's buildable. And we find a lot of times that contractors, it's a mixed bag. Some are pretty savvy, some really, you know, are primitive in a way. And in this case, even though we had full 3D models that described all this geometry, the contractor wanted, you know, sort of basic drawings for it. And I'm just kind of showing you some of those drawings that rationalize all of the geometries of the building. And then here's the porch, and you know, again, it's kind of the underside of the canyon as we think of it. Another view, and that's the picture up in the upper left, is how it gets used a lot. You know, we're fortunate in the West that we have a dry climate, so if you provide shade, you know, we can do almost everything outdoors, and this is kind of used in this capacity all the time. So, you know, to build this, the contractor asked us to, you know, instead of using a BIM model, to give us all the coordinates in an XYZ in space. So we made a bunch of these kind of drawings, and they literally made a grid on the ground, and they scaled up and started to hold their framing in that location, and that's how they determine that. that was accompanied by 17 sheets of, this is a 30 by 40 inch sheet, that we had 17 of these sheets, tables, which had every point in space, X, Y, and Z. And so it's like kind of like an old school building of it. And each one of those points had a line or curvature to kind of describe that connection. And then, some areas we showed those compound curves and how to put them together. And then this is, what the basic frame looked like. The key thing is you can see on the left-hand side, that's a 120-foot cantilever to make the porch. So it's a fairly beefy truss. That truss is about almost 500 pounds a foot, to take upload and other things like that. You could see it a little bit better here, the kind of clear span. And the things I was telling you about, all those little holes you see in the building, those are vents basically throughout the entire building. This is how we deal with a lot of the mechanical. We have an interior mechanical room, and to keep from having vents all over, we did everything. All the housing of it was behind the panels of the facade. So if you need to service any parts of it, the certain panels actually lift off the building to get to it. So doing so, we're able to have a building which is a four-sided building, or really four front doors in a way. And this is just a little shot to show you some of the construction of that. So that's the slot where all the water is collected. You can get a scale or sense of the scale of the porch. And we always imagined it with snow on it. The interior, that's the west-facing wall, and it's one big gallery. And that wall you see behind is actually a storage bin for movable partitions. So that's looking to the west, out onto the porch and the entry, and it's a full glass curtain wall, so that you see into the building, at all times. And this gives you like an idea of the context. So it is on Main Street, their Main Street. And I'm going to show you now here, this is the north side, or the site on the street. And you can see to the left, that's actually our service entry. There's a garage door there. We did went through great pain to make it really feel like it's part of the existing building. And then on this north side are all the admin offices. So they all have views, again, with very little need for curtains. And here's kind of the main entry space with the curtain wall to the west, and the educational center right off of the lobby, and then the main room where the exhibits take place, and the little reception area. So this is another similar project in North Carolina. It's a 1910 ice house that we renovated and added on to. This started as a much larger project to tear this down and build a much bigger museum on the site. And what a lot of institutions face that are existing like this, they, sometimes don't think through that they're going to be closed down for 2 years. And some may not survive being closed at that point. And once they realized that they were going to have to close down, we started looking at a new strategy of actually restoring this building and adding on to it. As a consequence, we wound up getting historic tax credits that paid for almost the entire building, and they were shut down for a very short period of time. These types of buildings are very symmetrical. You can kind of see in the bottom, the 3 bays, the entry at one point was right in the middle. I got really interested in the side of it, the service door. This is where they delivered the ice. And I kind of liked it. I liked it, the entry for ice, the entry, it's an industrial way to do it. Come in the side door, the back door of your house. So we started thinking about not doing what you would expect of entering right in the center of the existing building, but actually enter through the service door in a sense. And so that's what we started to do, was to look at, the side of the building and how we could do something with that, reinterpret that service entry and make it kind of interesting entry point to the building. So we started to look at these ideas of how we would deal with that canopy in a new way by sort of folding it. And that's the structure as it started to unfold, with a garden directly off of that entry. You see the colors, this starts to become this like sky blue. This is all perforated, layers of perforated aluminum. We used an old Southern trick by painting it like the sky, and no hornets or insects go in there. It fools them. They think it's the sky, so they don't go in there and nest. But you get this beautiful kind of dappled light, and you shade the building in what is a very hot, and harsh climate. So they have these, great parties here. It's become kind of the centerpiece that's revitalized this whole Depot district right downtown Raleigh. And the key here, as you can see, it had a basement, and, the clients thought of the basement as kind of garbage space, and we thought we could bring that into as part of the main space. So we cut a hole into the basement, and we made a new axis through it. So the building has axes off the street, and we have our side door entry, which is really right through the whole of the building. That's what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now with the hole cut in it. And so what it does is we kind of, in a way, doubled the space, because it's no longer a basement. It's really part of their space. And it's like, I'd show you these pictures just because it's been wildly successful as a place for people, but also a place for art. And it just varies between being a place for people and a place for art. And so they have, it rotates between these incredible and crazy types of events to weddings. They're booked like over 100 days a year for weddings at this place. And it really just shows how a small, you don't need really a big new building to really transform or be transformative in neighborhoods. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and Jeff's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Florida.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Hollywood, Florida, but this is a city beautiful plan based on Joseph Young's 1920s plan. It's a pretty iconic city. This just happens to be the Art and Culture Center Hollywood that we're actually now working on an expansion wing for. And this is, if anybody's familiar with Florida, and especially Boca Raton, this is an Addison-Meisner Mansion from the 1920s that you kind of see behind that arcade. And the arcade was added on over time to this project. It's interesting because in the 1920s to about the 1960s, it served as a private residence. And then from the 1960s to the 1990s, this served as a funeral parlor. And then in the 1990s on, it actually turned into the Art and Culture Center for Hollywood. And so they're looking at expanding this into a new arts education wing. Next slide, Larry. So, what we're looking at is the historic building. You can kind of see towards the left-hand side, it's got the gray tone over the roof. And our new expansion is shown in the orange tone to the right of that. And it's probably better understanding it when you look at that diagram off to the right-hand side, where the yellow is the existing and this orange is the new. And what we were really trying to do is off to that west side, it's a parking lot right now. And we wanted to create and capitalize on creating a courtyard space for the client, for the user who wanted to expand in there. And so again, in this diagram, you see the 1920s through the 1960s, 1990s, and then into the 2020. And the whole idea of our project was to really connect in to this historic one. Next slide, Larry. And so our first idea is, as you can kind of see in the top left here, is there's the existing building. The proposed below that is basically connecting in our new piece, almost inserting it or plugging it in, creating this courtyard space. And there's some original concept development sketches there at the top of the diagram. And we were really trying to work in how you developed and connected the old and the new. And so with this, you see the yellow kind of indicates the actual areas that exist right now, and they're flex galleries, main gallery spaces, and then the orange kind of reflecting the new arts education wing with this new lobby piece that becomes in essence an entry sequence where you come in off of a porch, you move into the lobby, you can see into the courtyard. And we're really trying to balance a lot of different considerations, because in one case, the new Arts Education Center is going to operate for young kids, and that needs to be a secured environment. And then in the other case, they're open to the public to go into these new galleries. And so there's a lot of balance to try to make it not look so compartmentalized, but really leveraging the opportunity that the lobby created as this kind of ecotone between the gallery spaces and the new education arts wing. And so here you can see we came up with this kind of sweeping roof form that would just connect. So it's paying homage to the historic building, but it's also projecting forward. I mean, one of the critical things, as I was talking about Joseph Young's plan, is he created these great large traffic circles. And so this project is located not too far from one of those. And so we really wanted to hold that western corner with a 30-foot tall, essentially 30-foot tall building, and then just kind of bringing that down and sweeping it back into the existing or historic structure. And so this is what you would see from coming in across the street at that entry towards looking at the lobby, as well as a new and essentially a performing space that we wanted to be a window into the city. So the city, this was one of the biggest missions of the client, is the old building really didn't allow for them to see what was going on the inside. And so they really want to kind of showcase those activities. And so that's the sweeping roof form with the large storefront, that glazing. We allow for the city to become part of the stage, or the stage to be the city. And so it really showcases what the role of this new art and culture center is going to be. And here you can kind of see another view of the historic building, or the existing building in the left, and then the new off to the right-hand side. And as you move towards the corner, this is and that whole glass facade is actually the north face of the building. And then so we're looking at this new western wall, and there's not much to see there. It's actually, if folks are familiar down here, Florida Power and Light has a 15-foot easement through there, so there's not much we can do. And we're looking at a 20-story garage off to the other side of the street. And so what we were trying to achieve is the fact that, too, it's the western exposure, is looking at something that could shade, but also came in elegant skin. Next slide, Larry. And so we looked at a previous project that we developed in Seattle, and figuring out how could the skin actually go ahead and still allow for light transmission through, but really essentially became a radiator. So this aluminum clad skin would become a radiator for that west building to essentially absorb the heat and shade it. And we found and identified this shape as a very efficient shape in the use of materials. And this project is under an affordable means. And here you can just see the folks testing this out in the lab for the previous project that we were working on. But we're using that, and here's some examples of what that project looked like in Seattle, but we're using that same kind of technology in this project in Hollywood. And so here you can see it now looking from the south, looking to the north. And it's really protecting. There's some large glass windows that let light into the new spaces. It's a performing arts space as well as art studios and broadcasting studios. And so we're hiding some of that because, again, these have young kids in there. And so we're really being cognizant of protecting them, but as well as the building for energy efficiency and other means. Next slide, Larry. And so here you get that kind of the elevation showing this very sweeping roof form, and then the section on the bottom, you can see how it connects into the existing building on the left-hand side, and then the new lobby as well as the new spaces. And we were looking at this, and it kind of paid homage to some of the historic historic mid-century modernism in Florida, like the Cocoon House by Paul Rudolph and Ralph Twitchell here that you see, and we are really trying to kind of be playful within that context. Here's a view from the lobby looking into the courtyard. And again, kind of pairing that with the view of the Cocoon House that you can see on the bottom right there. And then the view from the courtyard looking back to the north, back towards that lobby piece and connecting that in. And then a view from basically Young Circle, the traffic circle I was talking about, back. So you can see that the building has a nice presence now, and we're really trying to, again, make it iconic, but also that it's a window into the building's uses. Next slide, Larry. So the next project that we'd like to talk about is the Manila Museum of American Art, and this is one that we are currently working through. And if anybody's been to Central Florida or into the Orlando area, this one's actually connected into a cultural arts district, and it has museums as well as other events. But I think one of the important things to note is this parking garage. The red is our site. The parking garage that's off to the top of that red zone was interesting because that's the main promenade or the procession coming in, and then you can see the original Manila Museum of American Art is there with the A on top of it. And so it's a 10,000 square foot former private residence, a mansion. And next slide, Larry. And so what we were thinking, and the site is amazing. I mean, this is, Central Florida. And if anybody's ever visited Central Florida, I know we have several folks on here that are actually in the Gainesville area, but Larry and I, both at University of Florida, we always thought of these landscapes. And Central Florida is known as the land of lakes, and you have these beautiful cypress strands and then live oak forests. And so we're really trying to figure out how to achieve this into the site. And these are actually some existing photos of the live oaks at the front of our site. There's one amazing one called the Mayor's Oak. And, here you can see the red building beyond is actually the existing Manila Museum of Art. And ironically, it's hidden. What you see most is these trees. And ironically, there's clearings which have Alice Aycock, a lot of her sculptures in the sculpture garden to the to the east of this of the existing building. And so we were really trying to figure out how do we kind of take these elements and integrate them into the design. And in this case, on the left-hand side is what we were kind of given. It was where originally the museum staff and some other previous planning wanted to locate the new extension shown here in pink and the existing building shown in gray of the existing 10,000 square foot and then the new 30,000 square foot extension. The issue that we saw was the procession coming off of that parking garage to the top left, you can see there, and just looking at a parking lot that was serving, and it was really a kind of troubling procession or experience moving through. And so our first indication was kind of looking at developing the idea that you see on the right-hand side, where we would really look at the building as an extension into the park, that we would recreate the sculpture garden, and the building actually became part of this park-like landscape with preserving every single tree on the site. And so we were looking at a lot of sustainability features in here too, and just how to kind of slip it into in between these trees. Again, we didn't get rid of a single tree, but how we could bring in light strategically in the museum. From the north side, we got direct light. We were also looking at geothermal technology that could potentially be integrated to cool and heat the building from utilizing the lake to the actual south part of the site. And here you can kind of see an overall diagram of that. And I think one of the biggest things you see is this kind of opening that was created, essentially making two new buildings, one that would house the new gallery spaces in the existing, as well as a new events and event center and event space that was located on the bottom. And so one of the ways we were able to kind of achieve bringing in the site features and again, the live oak with the Spanish moss and how it kind of hung down was always with us. And thinking about old cracker style vernacular Florida architecture, how could we bring this kind of texture, this pattern, this kind of sense almost as a veil over the building? And so you can see on the bottom, we taking this natural pattern or natural texture, bringing it in as a pattern, and then creating precast concrete panels that would essentially play with dappling light over the course of the day in shade and shadow. And here's just some materiality studies that we were looking at. And so it was almost like a jewel box where on the outside you had the concrete skin, but where we were really trying to work with was lining the inside with this beautiful Pecky cypress wood. And so you can see this in the model that what's illustrated here in the wood tones is the Pecky cypress, and then you would have the white building or the white parts would be the concrete. And this is actually the procession looking in from the main way that you would come up and approach the building. And so there's this large kind of front porch that we wanted to be a feature moving in here. And you can see, again, the cypress and the concrete and then the lake beyond this building. And so one of the things you don't notice is the existing building. It's actually being wrapped with the new liners of this 30,000 square foot addition. And here's a view of the porte cochere at the front of the project, where you would actually come in with your car, drop folks off as you're moving to the entry sequence into the building. Next slide, Larry. And this is when you arrive into the lobby space coming in, and you have basically a directional opportunity here where to the left you would move into the events space, and then to the right you would be moving into the actual gallery spaces. And this was important for our client, and this is a view looking at that bridge that connects over to the event space. But working with our client, they wanted to be able to have multiple events operating on this within this project simultaneously, or within the day at the museum. And so we were really trying to be cognizant of control points, but they could have events while they still maintain the galleries open, or vice versa. They could have the event and the galleries going, but there was a lot of flexibility built into the scheme. And here you're seeing that glass bridge that connects the event space to back to the galleries. And this is the event space itself, kind of looking back towards the north at the entry pavilion, or the entry porches moving in. This is a view of it from its east facade, looking at the actual sculpture garden. And so the beauty here is the main drag. You would see this building from this side. And so we were feeling like we were giving Orlando its best porch. The biggest thing with Michael Manello, who's the benefactor on this, is he's really trying to, as a mission, bring art to the masses, bring art to the common people, to everybody, making it integrated. And so we really wanted to make a welcoming building that had these porches, had these other features that would allow for you to kind of be able to come up to, walk into the building and still explore and see the artwork. And so here you're seeing the building from the south side, from the lake side of it, at these large shading overhangs elements. And so off to the right-hand side is that event space, and then off to the left-hand side is the galleries, and then you have the lower galleries at grade level. And so we really saw this as a spill out for events. And here you see this is kind of left from the previous image, and looking at another kind of raised courtyard. And this is, in the raised courtyard, the actual element you see beyond there, the building, is actually the existing residence that was there. This is the only time you actually see one of the original pieces of it. But this is all where they have education wings, and here you can kind of get a broader sense of what it looks like from the lake side. But you have education wing off to the far left, as well as the galleries in the middle, and then that event space. And we're really thinking about something, again, like Paul Rudolph would have done with the Milam House, and how you have these kind of apertures that would shave the building. We actually created very deep ones, so we never received a lot of direct light, especially on the artwork. And the sawtooth pattern, we were very cognizant, even when you look at it from this view, that would be well hidden. and how we're bringing light into those galleries. And here's just some of the sections through the project. But again, the project kind of using the hammock, the live oak hammock as a veil over the building. And here the top section you see is a cut through the actual bridge that connects back to looking at the galleries. And then you see the section below is actually the galleries with the sawtooth roof. And you see this upper and lower gallery piece. Next slide. So here's coming into the main gallery, and you can see the lower gallery to the left-hand side there, the upper gallery pieces with the sawtooth roof bringing in that natural light from the north face. And this is just an opposite angle looking back from the other way when you get into the lower galleries. And this was really, we were cognizant about how we would display some of the main features or some of the main art pieces in the collection. And so, you know, the one on the rear wall here is one of the key paintings that were brought into this project. And so the whole sense is how you come in and the project or the building begins to unveil itself. And then you make this turn and then you see and celebrate one of the largest art pieces that they have in the collection. And here's just some of the other gallery spaces. Some of these are actually the existing spaces that have just been rehabbed. Next slide, Larry.
And I think that's it.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Great. So at this point, we definitely want to open it up to questions. We have a lot of people on here. We've had almost 100 people stick with us, and which is awesome. So it's always the first person to just kick it off and ask your question, because I'm sure there's plenty of things that they could elaborate on. Anybody?
Jeff, you stumped them again.
Oh yeah, no, that was you, Larry.
Larry, this is Janet. I was just curious when these projects were completed.
It's a good question. I'm really bad on the dates.
Well, the Sumo was completed 2016, Larry? 2016, I believe.
17,
Yeah, 2017.
years or so ago. And I think the Sakeros was maybe 4 years before that. The Arts and Culture Center in Hollywood, we're currently in technical drawing.
Construction documents on that.
So we're hoping to be in construction with that within the year. And Manila, we're just kind of starting the technical portion of the work. We've had a little slowdown because of the, COVID situation. Orlando's a pretty heavy tourist spot, and they rely on their tourist dollars. So we've had a little pause there. So, but that we're hoping that'll be done within the next 3 years.
Right. And the Art and Culture Center is under a general obligation bond. So it doesn't have that same, funding. It's what we say is it's COVID proof. So it's going forward whether or not COVID was happening. But I should point out that we are making some modifications with the understanding of COVID and the pandemics. There are some mild, just to make sure that there's physical distancing in the future to make it, pandemic proof in the future.
So we do have a question from Todd, and just to review with everybody for your questions, you can either put them in the chat and I'll read them out loud or ask you to address the group, or you can raise your hand like Todd has. So Todd, if you want to unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, Larry, it's Todd, March Studio. Thanks a lot for presenting. I really enjoyed seeing your work. Always good to see what you guys are doing. I had the opportunity to go and see the Utah project a couple years back.
Oh, good.
Really enjoyed it. I took my daughter. We were on our way back from Colorado. Loved it. I wondered if you guys could talk just a little bit about how you guys work. How do the two offices work? How does it start, and kind of how does the work go from there?
We operate like a little kid's soccer team.
I knew you were going to say that, Larry.
Yeah. I don't know. Generally, I'm the one who's quick to jump at what about this and what about this, and and then Jeff, so we bat it back and forth. So we're really one office in two locations. I don't think there's a distinction, you know, how obviously Jeff is running the work down there, but we kind of share. It's hard to tell really who's doing what
Right.
with that regard. We don't have a strong hierarchical order, you know, so we're a bit more even. And our senior people, you know, like Angie, Ralph knows Angie really runs the shop here, you know, and keeps everyone in line.
She runs both. No, I mean, it's a great question, Todd. And I, you know, just so you kind of know, in 2015, when we started the office here, you know, Larry and Angie had asked me to come out to Los Angeles. For some reason, my wife, she likes the fact of warnings that hurricanes give over earthquakes. So, you know, it was, you know, but I think it was mutual. I mean, at first we were doing a lot more California work over here. We got a few little things, but now, I mean, our office in Florida is got a bunch of projects, but as Larry said, it's kind of seamless. I mean, the fact is that, you know, unfortunately in Florida, and I'm sure you guys have that same effect in California, it seems that it takes 4 years just to get a project built here from beginning to end, you know, and so we're finally at that point where we're NCA on a few projects, and we're wrapping up a lot of the construction documents and getting things going. But I think it's interesting that I almost say that our office was, you know, pandemic ready, because we already understood how to kind of collaborate in this kind of bi-coastal setting. The fact that we had offices on the West and the East Coast, and so it's really it's made us stronger, and it's made it easier to transition to where we've been since March.
Yeah, great question. So we have a question from Keith Diamond. Keith, you want to unmute yourself, or you are unmuted?
I think I am unmuted.
You are.
First of all, hello, Larry, and you're not second choice. So
Usually I get a lashing from Kate, so be nice.
no, I was going to actually ask you a wildly positive question. First of all, great presentation and beautiful work. And I'm totally taken by the way you prototype kind of key construction typologies and explore, you know, precast and doing new things, and the skin on with perforated metal, and thinking about the insects and other pieces. Talk more about the 3D modeling, the testing, the prototyping kind of parts, because I'm jealous. See, it's a total nice comment. I love the way you push the boundaries.
Yeah, we've gotten, I think, by necessity, more involved in the construction aspect of things. So, you know, the little piece we showed of that blue facade is a building in Seattle. It's a design build project of about a $40 million guaranteed max design build project, you know, which we designed it and then won the competition, and the contractor had heart failure that he then had to build it, you know.
Yeah.
So we've kind of, we basically on that job, as in on others, we actually do the fabrication drawings for them. So, you know, it basically takes the mystery out of the building when the architect can provide documents that show how it's built, not just what it looks like. And so we've developed a group of folks here who are quite good at that, you know, and it's with tools that are available, and it's mostly about rationalizing geometry, being able to quantify, you know, what the pieces are and how they go together. So we've kind of done it mostly out of necessity, and we've just, you know, sort of fallen into it because, you know, we get that all the time. You know, contractor would look at it and go, ooh, that's going to be real expensive. And then we have to show them, well, here's how it is. And they go, oh, okay, it's not going to be that expensive. So what would happen in our previous life when we were unable to to provide such drawings, the client would just go, okay, let's chop it out or do something different because the contractor says it's expensive and we're not going to be able to afford it. So now we have ammunition that we can kind of come to the table and say, hold on a second, it's, here's what it is. So we're more informed, and I guess that's what makes it work.
Yeah, and I always love because Larry always tells me I've got 25 years of experience on you, Jeff. That's not going to work, And so it actually is very beneficial. But our first project even here was a small pavilion that we did at Pembroke Pines, and it was a tremendous kind of you would imagine it was a design build project where we actually had to build, design, and fabricate this and install it within a 3-month period of time. And it was a feat. We had a very tight budget and we were trying to do things. And there was a lot of prototyping that happened in that, some trial and error, but it was great working with fabricators. And I would say that one uniqueness for us is we always kind of look at what the local expertise is. And in that one, we were saying, hey, these guys here in Fort Lauderdale, they always build tuna towers on these boats.
They know how to build yachts.
Yeah, so they know how to roll pipe and they know how to build fences, so it's like let's look at how we can kind of play with this and
use the yacht technology.
right, and so it's almost kind of beating them at their own game in a way that we just look for those opportunities where you find the ordinary and how do you kind of bring that into something that we reinvent through just understanding that process.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So next we have a question from Mark Gardner. Mark, I'll see your question for you, but if you want to unmute yourself to add to it. He asked, what would you say are the shared traits among these different clients that allow the work to be successful?
Yeah, they're basically interested in, really a quality outcome. I think that's key. I always say, if you're going to do a great piece of work, you have to have all three. You got to have a great architect, a great builder, and a great client. If any of those are missing, it's a real uphill battle. So I think the clients really in common, what they have is a desire to, really contribute in a positive way. It's not just about what something looks like, but providing kind of something to the community. So oftentimes people, say architects are about what it looks like, but, the best projects we do and the best clients we have are the ones who are more mission driven than visually driven.
Great. That kind of leans into Jeff's question, which is next in the chat, and then I'll get to Ralph and Betty, who are politely raising their blue hands. So Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself, but his question is, a lot of projects have a great public space with a focus on people. I'm curious to learn about the future of public outside the museum with everything going on.
Larry?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's always a huge consideration. And, how we always think about triple bottom line thinking on sustainability, and sustainability is at the core of our projects. That's why it's kind of always interesting when clients ask us, hey, when are you going to do that sustainability thing? It's like, we already did it. It's, we're thinking about, these spaces and a sequence of arrival, but making sure, again, we understand climate, context, and other things. So, all of that kind of plays into to how we manage getting the spaces, and in particularly in the Manila and in the last two examples in Florida. I mean, we all know it's a hot, humid climate. So having those expansive overhangs, having this kind of proper orientation, and these are things that we didn't really talk about, but we always tell, I mean, just to piggyback a little bit on the previous one, like the client, these are things that they just get for free. But we're cognizant of trying to make spaces for people,
And also, we think about their experience in the buildings. That's like the key driver for us. That's the experience usurps form. The object is important, but it's the experience that stays with people. You know, I would argue, you know, all of us, if you think for a minute, you can probably think to a place from childhood or maybe not that far back that was really special to you. And then when you go and visit it, it never looks like what you remember. It always looks completely different than you remember. But the memories are always there as if it's like it was yesterday, you know, and so memories stay with people and experiences remain with them even when like what the building looks like dims. So I think if you create a place that's memorable, it will have longevity and stick with you more than anything. You know, another thing that is we didn't really talk about, but, you know, some of the buildings, 3 of them that we showed had existing buildings and were connected to existing buildings. And oftentimes we have debates with our client. You know, I didn't have a lot of time to talk about CAM and the existing building, but when you have an existing building, even when it's not a great building, you have to think long and hard before you just tear it down, because you don't tear down a building, you again tear down the memories that come with it. And again, if you think about it, every one of us can go, you know, I remember, you know, I grew up over here and there was Mrs. Lott's candy store here. It's like, you know, now it's like a crappy Target store, you know. And so like to the extent that you can preserve buildings and give them reuse, you retain history and you retain memories with them too. So I think it makes buildings richer when they are together as opposed to just kind of taking them down.
And to that point, Larry, I mean, it's kind of ironic that even our own offices are existing buildings that we've kind of turned into our own, but we're trying to maintain the history in those. Mm-hmm. It is part of the ethos of the office, I think.
Great. Thank you, Larry. This is Jeff Durkin. Nice to hear you speak again. We're going to talk soon.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, Larry. That reminded me of the Met and all of my experiences there. I'm going to, Ralph, if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Ralph.
Hey, Larry, why don't you, can you say a bit about, you know, sustainability, you know, is such a key component of your work. Maybe, you know, talk about how that is infused in your design process. And then just out of curiosity, you know, are you bringing in particular consultants like acoustic consultant or lighting consultants, energy consultants?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really talk a whole lot about sustainability. It's kind of embodied in what we do. In fact, I would argue that a building that is an energy hog that everyone loves is more sustainable than a zero energy building that nobody likes. And so I think, you know, the sustainability aspect for us is, I think, more a question of ethics. It should just be done. We try not to make a big deal about it. You know, what I like to say is, you know, when was the last time you heard an architect prancing around going, isn't my building great? It's ADA accessible. It's fantastic. You know, it should just be like code. We should just be making sustainable buildings. It shouldn't be, no architect should be, you know, put on a pedestal because they made a sustainable building. It should just be the way you do things. And we generally don't talk about it with our clients until they start making mistakes or telling us, hey, can we do this? And, you know, we're getting a lot of resistance. And then we go, well, you know, this is a really bad thing to do. We just had this conversation this past week with a New York client who's taking away stairs. And, you know, he's a big wellness guy. And I said, well, you know, you have this whole amenity level on the 3rd floor and the 1st floor. And now the only way to get to it is through a fire stair or the elevator. You know, I said, you really should consider having these stairs connect and people will use them. And he put it back in, you know, and it was a key design feature. So I think that's kind of, we use it as a design a way to win design more than a way, I think, to make, I mean, we just make the buildings sustainable by nature. It's almost like a reflex, but we use it as a weapon for better design.
Right.
I can give you example after example where, they want to cut things out of our building. And then we show by taking out the screen on the west side, you're going to have to increase the performance of your glass. You're going to have to, upsize your AZ equipment. And the delta becomes so small, they turn around and go to us, man, we're getting all of that stuff for that little money. So I think the architects and designers can turn it in their favor if they look at it properly. It can be a tool that enhances design. I hope I answered it, Ralph.
No, that's great.
And we've used that tactic more than one time. That's the problem.
Well, it's important that all these things are infused in how we approach a problem. So
Right.
Yeah.
you describe it in that fashion.
Thanks, Ralph. I was going to go to Juan's question, but it looks like he's left the meeting. And on that note, we'll just take 2 more questions and then to end for today. But so we have a question from, I don't know your username, but Crabtree, if you want to unmute yourself, because I see your hand raised as well.
Yes, it's Dave. Hey, good to see you, Larry. Hope everything's going well with your brother down in Florida, up here in Charlotte, and appreciate your work as always, and was just by the Raleigh project not too long ago. But I was thinking about the Meisner project and wondering, like, there's got to be a lot of constraints dealing with Meisner and history people and not in my backyard. And it's amazing that the sort of swooping roof, it feels like it had always been there. And I'm sure that took a lot of convincing to people. What were some of the challenges of historical constraints and creating the courtyard between them? And you see where I'm going.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll take, because I mean, that was a bit of a coaxing, but what we were able to show them is that form, which is not a very traditional form, but we, first and foremost, to answer that question, it's a historic building and we have to preserve elements of that building. And the form of that roof allowed for us to essentially do that. And we were able to just talk to the client, talking about scale, talking about how we were still being stewards of the historic building, but not mired in historicism. We were able to project looking forward, but also celebrating the past. So both are complementing each other is the way we presented it. And we had to be very careful because we've gone to city commission. We've had, I can't even tell you, I mean, we could sit here and have a whole discussion on community engagement and public meetings and the kind of process. I mean, this is a project that had 4 community meetings. It had 2 commission presentations. It has a go bond committee that we've had to present to. It has so many different entities that we just tell them we're honest. We have that conversation. We presented 2 ideas to the client first, and the clients, we think this sweeping roof form, I mean, we presented 2. There was one that was a kind of more boxy shape, and then the sweeping roof form. And
the sacrificial scheme.
Yeah. We already knew that scheme was going. Yeah. But we were able to identify, but we did it with a model, honestly, is how we showed the existing building, here it is, and then showing this kind of plugging in of the new piece and talking about the mass, the proportion, how these complement.
It's also in part an enlightened client.
Oh, it is.
And also, I grew up in Florida. I went to school there. I left 30 years ago for all the reasons, you're pointing out. It's like, I worked for Gene Leedy, who did these incredible things, in Florida. It's like building the Pompidou Center in Paris, every building he would do. And so it is a very difficult climate to do that. But, I've been away and kind of have built a practice that has, let's call it a reputation or a body of work. And so we, quite frankly, we've gone back to Florida with a body of work, and some people We won't mention any names, look at it and go, I wouldn't hire those people if I were dead, and others get very excited. Right. So, it's kind of, we do run in with like-minded people in a way. So we're, I don't want to make you think we're magicians and we're able to just poof, win our way. But we do have to work at it.
Yes. More often than not.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So Juan was able to rejoin us and had a question earlier. Juan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Is it Star Juan?
No.
Juan Gonzalez?
Oh, no. Okay.
I was going to say that's not fair.
Oh, I'm not sure if it's going to work.
We may have lost him again.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll type it in. We can take another question.
Juan, are you there? No. Okay, so let's go to Tori. You had a question earlier, if you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. So my question kind of is about how we move forward throughout this whole pandemic we're facing right now. A lot of the projects that we talked about today have impactful exterior spaces, and I know that'll be even more important moving forward. But how do cities in more difficult climates, how do you propose that they approach this issue of this need for more exterior space?
Jeff deals with that more in Florida than we do in California. We all wear masks here.
Oh, we all wear masks here too. But the statistics don't show that. But I think it's a great question, and it's, first and foremost, I want to just say, like, even in Florida, these are challenging to talk about outdoor spaces because this is a hot, humid climate, and you would think that augmented, mechanical systems is the way of the future, because I always felt like you were walking from one ice box to another, and you're just sweating between them, and those are challenges. But to think about it from a pandemic perspective, I think it's a really great question, and a little beyond the cultural projects that we're presenting today, how we're going to reimagine cities. And cities were always reimagined after pandemics, ironically, and diseases. But I think in this case, we're going to see a lot more communities retaking the public realm, especially for the most part, our public realms are streets. We don't have piazzas, plazas, we don't have a ton of parks. And we're going to have to reinvent how to create proper physical distancing within those. But you're seeing even the mayor of Paris has now created what she's calling the concept of the 15-minute city. And it's about how your basic services and needs, this kind of hyper-localized way that we're going to live, that we can walk, bike to things in our communities. And even in 1929, you saw this with Clarence Perry's neighborhood unit scale of thinking. And so I think when we look at our public realm, it just needs to be designed for practical means and for physical distancing moving forward. But I think there's a lot of positivity that this current health crisis is just as much at fault on the way we design our communities. And it's not to say that we need to be de-densifying. I think that's something to be very critical of. And I loved Larry took the op-ed from the LA Times. And
that was Angie.
It was Angie, even better, and Angie marked it up and just really kind of bluntly stated the fact that, we should not go back to sprawl, because there is good reasons of why we need to create more intensity in our urban developments. And it's not just related to energy efficiency and other issues, but just the way that we pay for basic services and how we're going to pay for these communities of the future are really going to lend themselves to that. And so we just have to be very critical moving forward that we don't lose a lot of the traction that we've made in the last 20 years, I would say, to how we recreate livable cities and communities and these kind of soft city approaches. There's some great books out there, but on these subjects. And so we this is a whole new branch of our office that we're really expanding into, is the kind of urban design realm and the planning realms. And we've always been cognizant of them at the scale of our buildings, but we're again expanding that kind of that repertoire.
Thank you. So I did say 2 more questions, but if you guys want to go and cover some of these last questions.
We're fine.
You're fine? Okay.
Yep.
So I got Juan's question again privately. So just read it out loud. Seeing how the roof structures play a vital role in your case studies, how does the overhead, horizontal data organize spaces and people in the locations and these cultural programs?
I think probably referring to the, roofs, we make shade, that's like the most paramount thing.
Right.
In Florida, that's like shade is gold, and, that's one thing I've learned. If you can make buildings that have shade, going back to kind of what Jeff was talking about, going from one ice box to another. Growing up as a kid in Florida, we were the house at the end of the block where you'd look at the sliding glass doors and the water was running down on the inside, because it was like 60 degrees in our house, and you go out into 100 and you're paralyzed. And so, if you make buildings that have exterior space or that's shaded, not only do you have a transition when you go from, outside to in, your eyes also adjust. So it's something we think about too, like the glare reduction. And you can have your buildings at a higher temperature too, so when you, if you transition, you have that transition, it's easy to do. So we really try to create the overhangs to provide shade. Now, I have these nightmares about it too, because some of the great architects that I've worked for, have done the same thing. And 20 years later, you go by and see it, and some, smart new owner has said, hey, it's really cheap to add more space to my building. We just fill this in underneath here. And then the next thing they say is, boy, it gets so hot in that space, I need more air conditioning. So we kind of use it. It gives buildings depth. It's an easy thing to for your clients to cut out. And that's why we always kind of think of the things we do as performative as well as aesthetic, and then you wind up in a win-win situation if you do that. Otherwise, it's really easy to be eliminated from your project.
Well, my very first professors at Florida said, what is the Parthenon other than a dumb box with a great wraparound porch? And I think you can see some of the ideas that are come across these culture projects, especially with CAM. I mean, that's just a great porch put on a dumb box. It's like it's a beautiful old industrial building, but the porch, I think, really gives it that sense. And so looking for those very surgical opportunities that provide shade or some sort of spaces that just become these handshakes between the public and private realm are really critical for us when we think about this. So it's not just performative, it's, or in one meaning of performance on energy efficiency, but the social sustainability and other things that we already kind of talked about.
So he had a follow-up question with that, which is interesting. Is there a unifying aspect of uniting different cultures beneath one plane?
It's a great question, Larry.
Cultures. I mean, I think it's more environmental than cultural. I think obviously when we work overseas and other places, there's a much greater distinction. The hardest thing when we first started doing work in China, it took me a long time to get used to the Chinese kitchen. You know, it's like, it's a totally different cultural thing. So in some places it's very different, but I think within the continental United States, I think it's more about the region or the climate and how you address that, and maybe a little less cultural than environmental.
Well, and just to add to that, I think, we're always cognizant of the diversity and equity in a lot of our projects, and making sure that we hear other voices on our teams, but also within, the work. And that's some of the best projects we have are always when there's multiple people at the table. And I think that's the thing too, that's important for Brooks Scarpa, is that we are kind of open source design studio. We, as Larry's kind of already indicated, I mean, the best ideas kind of come forward, but I think they come forward in these very collaborative sessions sometimes, and it only strengthens the project. Him or I may have, a quick concept or a quick sketch or a quick idea, but they get so much better when we bring others into the picture and developing those projects.
Yeah, we've gotten, we listen. I mean, you have to be a good listener. I think it makes you better. Like, I've worked with Kate. She knows how to do a courthouse. I don't, so I don't profess to know everything about a courthouse. So I listen to Kate. I have opinions about how things work, but there are other consultants too that I think, our profession's too complicated to think you can do it all yourself. I work for Paul Rudolph, and that's like a whole different generation of architects. And that house we showed earlier in the presentation, the Milam house, that was one of the great inspirations to me growing up. So when I worked for Rudolph, the first thing I did was go to where he kept all his drawings in the shop and dig for that house. Well, it was like 4 sheets of drawings, the construction set, and it had the plan with elevations around it. You can't even do general notes today in 4 sheets, and there was a note on there that, like, to the contractor that says, it literally said, build the best quality that you can. That was a note on the construction set. It's a different world. So you got to kind of listen to people. You can't do it yourself. And it's I teach too, and so does Jeff. But that's the thing I always tell my students, when I went to school, you had to be the designer to be successful. And I think our profession's so big. I always tell my students, you don't have to be a designer. You need to understand it, but pursue what you really love about, if it's construction technology, if it's, materials research, if it's project management. We need all of that. Our profession's better for it. We're one of the last technical professions that, we're slow to catch on to that. You look at other professions like scientists, I have a friend who's a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and knows everything about, this one cancer gene, but he can barely put his pants on in the morning, but he works with other smart people. And I think we need to do that more. We need to collaborate more with people who have greater expertise in areas. The issue we always have, or the issue we generally have, is, when we get too many smart people in a room working together, the client looks at us and go, I'm not sure which one to sue if things go wrong. So this is no good. I just need one person.
Thank you. And Juan, thanks for coming back on to get your question, and really appreciate it. That would be a nice place to end, but Dick has a question here. It's very specific. Dick, if you want to unmute yourself, just asking if you engage in a preservation historian consultant with those projects that have historic significance. Dick, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, yes.
There you go.
Hey, Dick.
Hi, Larry. of course, being a preservationist at heart, I was quite encouraged to hear your comments about the importance that you press on it. So, and I know there's a lot of challenges that goes into when you're dealing with many historic buildings. Are there particular ones that you have identified that were really a major challenge, or are they all taken stride?
Yes. The major challenges in the United States working with historic fabric means make it look like the historic building. If you go to other countries like Europe, you know, they make it look different and compatible. And so, you know, we run into a few enlightened people such as yourself that understand, you know, that the federal code says it should not look like the historic building.
Right.
It should look different and be compatible, but that's not how most people in positions that do that interpret it. And, you know, it's funny, I was asked, actually, I think 3 times now, the state preservation architect in Arizona, Bob Frankenberger, you know, he asked me to speak at their historic preservation conference. And I was like, are you sure you have the right person? I mean, I don't think I think you made a mistake, you know? And, you know, and so he convinced me I should do it. And I did, and I realized I did have something to say. And I made a presentation, you know, about a little bit about what I talked about, but I showed not just our work, but other examples of how preservation is also not reimagination. There's a lot of historic fabric that would see the wrecking ball if it's not, you know, reused in a way. And so I showed these projects, and afterwards the historic preservation architect for the city of Tucson came up to me and said, I see things in a totally different way now. You know, but by and large, we run up against, you know, well, can you make it look like, you know, can it, you know, even if you do it with wood instead of brick, can it look like the existing building? That's the biggest challenge.
Right. I could understand that. I know here we're working on actually some design guidelines to respect our legacy, but in Palm Springs, but wanting to encourage innovation going forward as well, just as was done back in the 40s and the 50s. So
yeah, because if you do the same thing, it's really not, you know, it's against the spirit, particularly in Palm Springs, where, you know, the whole Palm Springs is the mid-century modern was like so earth-shattering and different, you know, and then, you know, if you copy it, it's going backwards. It's against the spirit of what was there, but it should respect it, no doubt.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick.